So really excited to go through this special presentation this evening with a couple of special guests. But before we jump into what we're going to cover and who's going to cover it, I would like to go ahead and share our land acknowledgement. Jefferson Land Trust acknowledges that the lands we work to preserve are within the traditional indigenous tribal lands of the S'Klallam, Chimacum, Twana, Squamish, and other indigenous peoples. These indigenous peoples are the original stewards of these lands and waters since time immemorial. Jefferson Land Trust recognizes that European and American colonization irrevocably changed the homeland and ecosystem of the tribes, effectively destroying traditional land access and ways of life. Working in conjunction with the descendants of these people, the Jefferson Land Trust will have our work be informed by the recognition of this immeasurable disruption and to deepen our partnerships. So this evening, we'll actually get to hear a little bit about some of our recent work with the tribes that we're excited about. But before we get there, I just wanted to go over the whole big picture for tonight. We started this series with, way back in the spring, a lot of community members coming out to Valley View Forest to help us select the leave trees and the harvest trees as part of this pilot community forest project, where we are trying to balance the ecological needs of the forest with the economic goals and the social goals of this place. So providing educational programming and recreation and timber income or harvest income, as well as all sorts of ecological benefits to wildlife and water quality. So we're balancing a lot of different things and we're learning quite a bit as we go. And this series of presentations is hopefully encapsulating some of those lessons learned and goals and objectives. And we'll finally wrap up this evening with our vision moving forward. Before we get there, I'm also going to introduce tonight a couple of special guests. That includes Cody Wayland of Wayland Constructive. Cody's going to be speaking to us about the milling process. One of our major goals with the Valley View Forest Community Forest Pilot Project was to keep as much of the forest products, if you will, what's taken off the land locally as possible. So we were trying to sell to local businesses, donate to local nonprofits, and work with local tribes to make sure all that material stays here in Jefferson County, Clallam County, the Olympic Peninsula area, and the wider region at most. We were really able to do that quite a bit. We talked a little bit about that in the last presentation. Tonight specifically, Cody's going to be talking about, as a small business owner in Jefferson County, how he was able to purchase locally grown logs and mill those up. Then we're going to bring on Tim Lawson from the Port Townsend School of Woodworking and the Splinter Group. And the Port Townsend School of Woodworking is one of the community nonprofits we were able to work with to donate wood to local causes. So they have some really exciting plans for how they're going to use the Valley View Forest timber to support their mission. We'll touch on how the Port Gamble S'Klallam tribe also is involved in this pilot project by coming out and harvesting cedar bark from the trees that we knew were going to get harvested before they left the property. And we'll talk a little bit about, after all those different activities and different players, how we see the forest moving forward and how we're going to keep checking on it over time. So really big picture next steps. But without too much ado, I would like to introduce Cody for this evening. There you are. Hi, Cody. And Cody is the owner of Wayland Constructive, and he is, well, I'll let you introduce yourself, Cody. Take it away.
Hello, everybody. Thanks for having me, Carrie. Really glad to be here. I'm Cody Wayland. I own a business called Wayland Constructive. I'm a woodworker and a sawyer. And I'm also a father and an artist and an outdoor enthusiast. But I think mostly what I'm here to talk about is wood and not kids. So yeah, that is that. And my business kind of runs sort of a full circle system. So oftentimes, or what my specific interest is sort of seeing something from start to finish. So oftentimes I'll start with a log, for example, from Jefferson Land Trust, and then I'll mill that log, dry that lumber, and then make something from that. And that was always just what was very interesting to me, and so that sort of became what I ended up doing for work as well. So yeah, that's a little bit about me. I live in Port Townsend and have 7 acres here of forest, and I love this area dearly, and I'm very interested in its future for myself and my children, and I really value the work that Jefferson Land Trust does here in this community and what they're working on, and just really happy to be with them and working with them and doing that. So that's a little about me. Should I put my slides on now, Carrie, or is it now a good time for that?
Yeah, take that away, Cody, if you want to
Cool.
put up your slides.
Thank you. I'm going to put some slides up here. Pardon me, 1 minute.
So while Cody's pulling those slides up, I'll just say that we at the Land Trust were really fortunate to be working with Cody. He, as he mentioned, owns and runs a local mill, and as part of this pilot project, great, it looks like those slides are up. There's a big, there was a bit of a process to get from growing trees to actually producing local wood products that create local jobs and have an hopefully positive impact on the local environment. And Cody played a pretty critical role in making sure that some of these logs stayed local, both for his own business as well as with some of the local nonprofits who chose to accept donated logs. So just wanted to throw that out there, that he was an important part of this process, and I'll let him take it away now.
Thank you for that, Carrie. Sorry for that delay with the slide presentation there. So here, I guess I'm just going to give a quick talk. I have 10 slides, and it'll just sort of run through just a handful of images. I'm going to speak over those images and just about sort of the process from where I took up with Jefferson Land Trust to some things of how these have been used recently, or just there's images on here that aren't from Jefferson Land Trust forests, but just to sort of give a little bit of ideas of what can happen or what could happen in the future, or with log to lumber kind of processes. So I was just, as I was preparing this slide, I was looking over here after I put this together and realized that this first slide is really kind of like what I am about a little bit. And I have this kind of duality that I engage in. I really like trees standing, and I really like forests, and I also really like wood and trees on the ground, and I like both those things. And so I think for me, I'm very excited to be working with Jefferson Land Trust. I think because it's a way that I am able to kind of balance my own interests and desires, that I kind of know what's happening on the forest side of things, which I think is quite, as a woodworker, something that's quite, even as a person who knows a lot about wood and has been doing woodworking for so long, sometimes we're using materials that we have almost no idea what is happening on the front end of where these materials came from. We know that the materials is beautiful, and we love the material, but that's something that I get really excited about, knowing that full story about where it came from and how. And I get really excited that I can actually still walk in a forest from where I'm making things from. So where I'm not sure if everyone here was in all the lectures before this, but I think we've been carried through to a point where we have logs on a landing deck, oftentimes, which is a huge amount of logistical and challenges to overcome to get these large things out of the wood, down out of the woods into some place. Oftentimes that's where I pick up. I'm not a forester. I know more about from the log forward. And so this here is, you're looking at Western red cedar. There on my right, there's a log down just out of the forest, and then that log will get cut into specific lengths. Oftentimes with, for instance, something that I'm doing, I'll cut logs to the specific length of what I want. If I need, I'm building a sunroom or something, and I know I need a span of 16 feet, then I'll cut a log at 16 feet, and I know there's going to be posts, then I can cut the other logs smaller, and then I can use those different aspects in the most efficient way to get into a project. So yeah, we're looking at Western red cedar, which is fantastic wood. Lots of beautiful Western red cedar came out of this harvest that Jefferson Land Trust did. I have lots of that Western red cedar, which is a really beautiful wood. Here you can kind of see at the base aspect of Western red cedar that is not the only reason, but why it's such a valuable tree. It has some to do with the amazing properties of the wood, being that they're rot resistant and can be outside in the weather for so long. There's so many great things about Western red cedar, but also why it's so expensive is this, it's a challenge to mill because of the shape of the tree. There's this large taper. So oftentimes it's hard to get very many straight boards, even if you have a large tree. And then oftentimes in the larger tree, the center, which would be starting in here, you can see this different coloration, often can get into there's rot pockets that run up the center of the tree, and that really eats away at the board footage that you can get, especially in straight boards. So this is me running my mill, which is a small scale mill. And I'm just going to take a second to kind of point out a few basic aspects of the mill, what that even means or what it is. So there is a saw blade inside this box. There's two of these boxes. There's another one right behind it. There's two wheels in there and a blade gets tightened on there. There's a little hydraulic hand press, hydraulic jack that tightens this blade, and then just a small gas powered motor turns on. You pull this little handle, and there's inside this box, there's a belt that runs from the drive of the motor. It comes down here around another wheel, and that makes this wheel spin, which makes this big 14-foot long saw blade spin. That sits on a carriage. That whole mill unit sits on a carriage. That's a upside down T. This has little wheels that runs along a two little thin train tracks. And then just super simple, that there's basically a winch up here. You crank this little winch and there's a tape measure right here, and this little fellow will go up and down and up and down, and then you can just pass it through, cut an inch off, go down, cut an inch off, go down, or whatever shape or depth of board you're looking to make. So that's just the basic anatomy of the mill there. This, I have a little video here that I'll play in 1 second that is just going to show the mill sort of passing through a log. It's in time lapse. It was shot in time lapse, so it'll be moving much faster. Usually I'll cut a log and it might take, I'm going to say, a minute or 2 minutes to pass the saw through the log. But as you're watching this, you can kind of see how you start to see there's different grain that will show up as you're traveling down through this log. And there's all these different types of boards that can come out of logs, and different types of boards have different properties and can be used successfully in different ways. This is called flat sawing, where I'm just the log is just going right onto the mill, and the mill is just passing right through it. Nothing other than that. And you'll have these two edges of wood that is called live edge, which is a popular thing for certain aspects of live edge furniture, coffee tables, things like that. Another thing you'll see, this is a tiny little log. This is actually just the butt of a Western red cedar tree. And why this is such a tiny log, because of that taper, I can cut a log here and then up from there at 12 feet, and that will actually give me more board foot because it's more cylindrical. As it goes, I don't have to deal with this, and then I can kind of just cut off the bottom butt and do something else. Like, for instance, these is about 5 feet. These would be nice coffee tables, for an instance. I'm just going to play that video and let that sort of idea, what I'm talking about, that you sort of see these different grain patterns here. You're getting kind of a more fire shaped. And then as you get further down in there, the grain will present in a different way that looks tighter. You can see on the two sides, the grain will start to be a lot tighter. You could cut a straight board out of there, and that's what we might call quarter sawn, which is a very sort of stable board, which could be great for a lot of different things. So yeah, Western red cedar there. Fantastic tree. One of my favorite trees. So here you're looking at just two sort of styles of wood, right? So on the right side, you're looking at live edge slabs of black walnut, which is a tree that would grow in Port Townsend, but that's more of like a urban salvage type of a situation. It's not a naturally occurring tree, but it's a really beautiful wood to work with. And then on the left, you're looking at square edge boards. So this is sort of getting into two things here. The picture of the black walnut live edge slab. This is the quickest and simplest way to just put a log on the mill, cut it. It also leaves your potential, if you don't have something in mind, or you're looking for that organic pattern, which it seems like places like Eden saw a lot of clientele that I work with. I think some of those natural patterns are quite desirable for many people as we live in these quite square houses. But it would be very challenging to build a house out of that, as you know. So then you might have square edge boards. You're looking at Doug fir boards on the left, and how that would happen. To get square edge boards, you're sort of circling the square. So, you're starting in the round, and we take a pass off the top of the log. You'd have one flat edge, and you'd roll that 90 degrees, and then you cut the edge off of that. And so you're cutting off these little toenail shaped boards until you have a big square, and then you can rip that up however you want to see it. If you want 2x6s, if you're doing some house framing or something like that. It just sort of depends on designing your project design, and then you can custom cut for that, which that's something that I'm very interested in. I do a lot of is the custom cut, because again, it's a very efficient. If I know what we need to get, then I can select different logs to get different cuts out of it. And that's something that, I don't know, keeps me stimulated and is of interest to me. I have another video. So after you have the wood cut on the mill, again, it's green. So it's as soon as possible out of the forest. And it's very heavy and very wet, which for many purposes is not an ideal situation for working the wood. Because it's still kind of alive, and it can change, still has lots of change in it. So as it dries, it'll continue to shrink and change and warp and do its thing. And so something that we've come up with kiln drying. So this is a kiln that I run. This small kiln, I'm just going to kind of point out a few things here. It's just a big insulated box. And if you look at this, you'll see all of these boards. You can kind of see these little lines here. These are sticks of wood. They're all the exact same size. They're called stickers. I cut them at 7/8 of an inch. And so every single piece of wood in this kiln has the exact same space in between it. And this room in the center on the ceiling has a bank of fans. That's these little black squares you can see here. And then there's a baffle. This baffle will come down and seal across the top of this stack of wood. And so and these fans would then turn on. And so the only thing that can happen, the fans are drawing from the back, pushing from the front. So you get this circular airflow in there, and it has to be drawn through each of these uniform cracks, which kind of creates this even and uniform airflow coming through those cracks to help everything dry evenly. So then this box will just get closed up, and the fans will get turned on, a heating unit will get turned on, and we will sort of just bring the temperature up slowly. And so the wood sort of has this inherent, I don't know, someone that has more something than I have might be able to explain this, but it has this inherent desire to take moisture to its surface. It wants to release its moisture. So as you bring up the temperature and the airflow, the moisture will leave off the surface of that wood and migrate into the air. And in the air, then also in the back corner of this insulated box, this is a dehumidification kiln. There's a dehumidifier that will condense the moisture out of the air and dump it out of the back of the kiln by the gallon. Lots and lots of water out the back of the kiln. And that's how that wood dries. So the temperature will just start low and take it up. The hotter it gets, the more moisture migrates from the core or the inside of the wood out to the surface of the wood. When the moisture gets to the surface, it goes into the air. Once it's in the air, it gets taken out of the insulated box, dumped out the back. And then in some period of time, it's always different. If we were doing 1 inch thick Western red cedar, I could put it in here and turn it on and pull it out maybe 10 days later, and it would be dry, where in the air drying it might take a long time. 2 inches thick wood is going to take substantially longer than 1 inch thick, maybe 6 weeks in Western red cedar. And then there's also challenges with kiln drying. Once you get to a certain dimension, for instance, beams, almost any beam work that you're using from any lumber yard or some local sawyer like myself will be more wet. It's just they need to dry in a slower process, or you sort of start to work against yourself. This is a Jefferson Land Trust log here that you're looking at on the left, and I'm just trying to sort of illustrate a little bit of that process. So this just happened recently. That log was cutting there on the left side. And then this is sort of just a rough sawn board, and then it's in a house now. This is an ADU working with another wonderful local entity, the Housing Solutions Network, who are focused on trying to create houses for working people who want to be invested in the community versus just tourist houses for tourism. And so this wood got to be used in that project. This is a build that I did from start to finish. And so just sort of how these things can come in. This is trim work. Doug, Jefferson Land Trust, dug for Western red cedar, cedar, not cedar, dug for you could use as ceilings or exposed beamwork, or lots of different ways in which you could use that in your house. This would just be another product or something that would happen from the milling process. This is Western maple, and this was just in the milling process. You're cutting something, oftentimes burls will come out on the sort of side of a Western maple tree. You'd see those if you're walking in the forest. And oftentimes when you're milling, if you can picture, you're cutting off all that outside very often you'll just get that nice time where you're cutting through and there's just a nice chunk burl that you sit up there. So that's just a blank, turned on a lathe. You hook it on something, it's spin, and you cut away at you work reductively at it with a chisel. It's very meditative process, really enjoyable process. And then this is a black walnut table. I am just trying to throw some images out there of sort of how these things go from forest to something. I guess we all love tables and use them regularly. This is another sort of idea. This is a project that I did where we restored an old barn. And on the left side of the image there is a bit after where we started, but the beginning of the project. And then we milled the wood from the site and then re-sided and added doors and whatnot to this old barn. So again, just to give an image of products that can be used and how they can be used. Like for instance, Western red cedar would be a fantastic siding. It's such a wonderful material for outside. And this is sort of what it might look like. This is actually Doug fir that you're looking at now, which isn't as regular of a siding, but they did it way back then. So I was sticking with the trend. That is all the slides that I have right now and what I was trying to get through, so I could jump off of speaking.
Thank you so much, Cody. Really super exciting. I actually had not heard what you ended up doing with that fir. I think last time we talked, maybe some of it was going to some local businesses.
Yeah, that's definitely happened too. There's a lot of it down at the Chimicum Corner Store. They did their whole staff lounge back there with the Land Trust wood. and there's some going to the Wooden Boat School, and then sort of miscellaneous pieces to, you know, any number of people. I still have plenty of Jefferson Land Trust wood if anyone needs it. So
It's so exciting for me. I mean, I'm more obviously, not obviously, I suppose, but I'm more on like the growing the trees end of things. You know, here at the Land Trust, great, we can grow a really healthy forest and with lots of diverse tree species. And going through this whole process and learning through the community forest pilot, it's really exciting to actually get to see, you know, the trees where the intention here is to have some forest products coming out of this particular forest in balance with those ecological and social goals. But actually seeing that go out into the community, into the Housing Solutions Network and the Woodworking School and the Boat Building School, just super exciting from our end, I will say. The other thing I forgot, and I'm sorry about this, folks, but please, if you have questions for Cody or Tim or anyone else, that'd be me, I guess, you can go ahead and post them in the chat. We're going to have time for these folks to answer questions towards the end of the evening. So Cody just gave us a really great overview. I love that term, forest to something. So if you've got questions about the process of forest to something, the milling, the tree selection, the live edge dimensional lumber, the drying, where these things can go, how they get used, go ahead and put those questions in chat. And the same thing as Tim is going to come on here momentarily. Any questions for Tim, go ahead and put in the chat. So thanks for now, Cody. And with that, I would like to introduce Tim Lawson. He's going to magically appear here with me on screen. Perfect. So Tim, welcome. Tim is going to tell us a little bit about himself as well, but we got to know Tim through this pilot project, as well as some other community forest work. And Tim is a wonderful woodworker in town and also an educator. So a lot of different connections here in the community forest project. So thank you, Tim.
Thank you, Carrie, and thank you, Cody. That was wonderful to see your operation. I want to come and see it in person. So I'm just going to go ahead and share my screen. So I gave a presentation earlier in this series, and really this is a sort of continuation of that. So to introduce myself, I was one of the founders of the Port Townsend School of Woodworking and was the founding executive director. I'm a member of the Splinter Group who has been putting on the Port Townsend Woodworkers show. And I'm also sort of wearing another hat, a member of the League of Extraordinary Observers, which is a little bit of a grandiose title for a bunch of photographers who do work supporting conservation projects for Jefferson Land Trust and other organizations in the county. But I really, in this presentation, want to talk about the Woodworkers show and what the history of the show and what we're planning for 2022. The image that you can see on the screen is the piece that I had in the most recent show that closed on Monday. Here we go. So the Port Townsend Woodworkers show was originally founded by Jim Tolkien and John Markworth back in the late 90s and ran for about 3 years. And then it just got too much effort for them to continue to organize the show and lead and to continue to work. Then in 2006, a group of woodworkers here in town got together and resumed the show. And so we've had it going every year since 2006, and we're very proud of that achievement. It's held regularly at the Legion Hall the first weekend in November. And it's become a juried show. We just felt that we needed to begin to control or just sustain the quality of exhibits. And I feel that the quality of the show through that process has really improved over the last five years. We generally have about 25 exhibitors. And one of the things that totally delights me is that we have 2 high schools in the area that still have shop programs and woodworking programs, and that we've been able to include exhibits from them. And the work that some of these kids do is just amazing. So the last 2 years, 2020 and 2021, it's just not been practical for us to host the Woodworkers show at the Legion Hall. You know, in these pandemic times, lots of people, small space, we just didn't want to go there. So we've been very grateful to stores and galleries on Taylor Street to allow us to do a shop window version of the Woodworkers show. And that was up for all of last week. And here are some pictures of the work that were in the show. There were 8 exhibitors, members of the Splinter Group, and in a sort of new addition for us, which reflects, I think, very strongly on the woodworking school, we had 2 graduates of the 12-week Art of Furniture program show their work as well. And I really think that their work was probably the highlight of the show. So, and please forgive my photos. It's really, really difficult to take good photographs through a shop window when there's strong light. It was a challenge. So in the top row, the second from the right is the work of Annalise Wubeda, who graduated from the program actually back in April. And the work that she did is phenomenal. And I hope you got to see it. She made this small scale rocker, this wonderful urn, and the 3 lights that are hanging above it. And then in the window of the Grover Gallery was the work of Paul Pierce. Again, just some stunning work, and it's a real tribute to the instructor of that program, Kevin Reiswig, that all that work just turned out so beautifully. So the 2022 show is our intention to showcase Valley View lumber. This is contributing to the proof of concept that we can take material from Valley View, turn it into beautiful objects, and share it with everybody else. So let me talk you through what's going to happen. So these are 2 trees. In the left picture, you'll see them sort of adjacent to each other, but there is a single trunk alder on the left, and there is a twin trunk maple on the right. And we hope to be felling these 2 trees in the next 3 or 4 weeks. The alder has to be one of the biggest alder trees I've ever seen. It's about 36 inches across at breast height, which is huge. So we are delighted that the Land Trust, through the Woodworking School, is making these trees available to the Splinter Group so that we can offer them to makers to create work for the 2022 show. So big leaf maple, Cody showed some great shots of it, and I just wanted to show you a big leaf maple in a little more detail, just to give you a sense of some of the figure and the way that it looks. And this is the bench that I exhibited in the 2022 show. And there's two things I'm doing with this bench is one, showing the inherent beauty of the maple. There's two types of figure on it. In the middle at the top is the sort of burl figure. And then in the middle at the bottom is the fiddleback figure. And this tree is a local tree. There was a storm that downed a whole bunch of maples out near Gibbs Lake in 2007. And a subset of the splinter group went out and we milled these trees on site and collected this material back in 2007. It's been air drying at one of our group members, Steve Haversetz's farm for about the last 14 years, or not quite all that time. And then I collected it from him and turned it into this bench. But part of what I'm trying to do with this wood is say that furniture makers, and I think in some ways customers, need to or should adapt to wood or seeing their furniture not made from completely perfect wood. In this piece, I very deliberately left the wormholes in it. I want this piece to tell the story of this tree from where it was growing to how it was processed and to how it was made into a piece of furniture. That story is, I think, really, really important. The other tree that we're taking down is alder. And I'm just showing here some different uses of alder. Alder can be a great furniture wood. It can be a great trim wood. Excuse me, I've got this frog in my throat. It can be a great trim wood. And in the middle picture, alder was traditionally used by the local Salish peoples as to make handles for carving adze. And this is a carving adze that was made in that tradition. So you can see the blade at the bottom. That was the trunk of the tree, and the handle was a small branch. And that becomes a very robust form of adze handle. Then in the picture on the right, this is a chair, a Windsor-style chair made by Steve Haversetzer, and the spindles in that are all alder. You know, that's part of his commitment to local woodworking, is to reinterpret the traditional Windsor chair to use local woods, where these are made mainly on the East Coast. The spindles are either oak or maple, and the seat would be eastern white pine, but here the seat is alder. So it's just, to me, alder is a really great wood, particularly when you can get it in the size logs that we're anticipating getting out of the trees at Valley View. So what sort of wood's going to be available? Cody showed us some wonderful live edge slabs. We're expecting them to be in 8 to 10 foot lengths, 2 to 2.5 inches thick, and the width varies depending on how that is cut out of the tree. We will also be taking boards, and again, Cody wonderfully showed how dimensional lumber is created from the tree. So some of the alder, I think, we will be milling into boards. The limbs are also wonderful opportunities to use wood in a much more creative way. I think that could particularly appeal to people who like challenges in wood, people like myself. How can we use the curves that are naturally in wood and the grain that follows those curves rather than bending wood to make those curves. So I think there's some real excitement there. So we'll be making limbs available, we'll be making branches available, and again, much like Cody showed, we expect to be making turning blanks available to potential artists and exhibitors. So who can get this material? We think there's a wide variety of people that might be attracted to this. I know there's furniture makers who want the material, there's carvers, and when we get into the wood, we may find there's some really strongly figured wood in there, and that can really appeal to luthiers, and that would be just wonderful if we could find luthiers who would want it to use some of that material. Green woodworkers are people who make things like spoons and shrink pots, and there's a whole array of green woodworking materials, products, and I'm hoping that they will join us. So the Seattle Spoon Carvers group has already committed to coming to get some of the material, and the Seattle Wood Turners group are really interested in coming to get material as well. And then I think the other thing we would like to do is reach out to artists who use wood in their work. It's not necessarily their main medium, but they may incorporate wood into their work in some way. And equally, we would love it if artists who are just inspired by how do we use all of a tree, if they would just want to sign up to get some material, and we'd love to be surprised by what they make from it. So here's a rough timeline for what we're thinking to get the wood available. We're hoping to fell it in about the next 3 weeks. In early December, we're going to be milling it. In December to January, we will let it air dry. That reduces the amount of moisture in the wood considerably. Then February to March, it goes into Cody's good hands to get dried. And then right around April, we hope that the lumber will be available. We're going to encourage people to make stuff. In September, entries for the show closes, and then you will be able to get to see this amazing stuff that everybody makes in the 2022 show. And let's hope we can do it at the Legion Hall. I really hope that that's still going to be possible. So what's going to be the cost of materials? For slabs and boards, honestly, we don't know yet, because we've got to take what's the cost of felling, transport, milling, kilning, and then we divide that by the number of board feet that come out of that, and that will be the cost of the material. I would have to guess it's going to be, I'm not going to guess because I don't know. Limbs and turning blanks, essentially they're going to be free, but any donations to offset costs would be greatly appreciated. And branches, they're either going to go to people for free, or we're going to redistribute them in the woods to restore the forest floor. So one of the things I want to do is sort of pick up on what Cody was talking about in keeping, the wood, and Carrie, about keeping the wood local. And I really think we can look at local wood in parallel to how local food happened. I think the local food revolution took 25 years at least to happen. And the local wood, I think, is just beginning. And very analogously to local wood, to local food, there are local families, there are community forests, there's local sawyers, and there's local drying operations. Then there's all the artisanal value add, like millwork, furniture, cabinetry, treen, and garden. Now, I snuck that treen word in there because it really comes back to green woodworking. It's this wonderful old English word for any kitchenware that is made from a single piece of wood, whether it's a spoon, whether it's a platter, whether it's a cutting board. I think there's a potential little industry, local industry there. So how can you help? If you're an artist or you're inspired by this project, apply to get some of this Valley View lumber for your project. If you're not a maker or an artist, think whether you could actually buy or commission some wood made out of that, made and displayed at the 2022 show. You could engage with a local maker and commission a piece. Maybe the farmers market will start selling treen if they don't already, but you can ask the question, is that treen made with local wood? Building a house, you've already seen the material that Cody supplies. You know, can you step up and say, yes, I am going to commit to having local wood used in building my house, in repairing my house, in enhancing my house? Do you have a big tree in your property that's got to go? If it is, maybe you could sell it to somebody like Cody. Maybe you could sell it, donate it to somebody like the Splinter Group, and we will repurpose it for you. And then I think there's another challenge that we have to consider for ourselves is how do we manage trees to enhance their value? As you might have guessed from my accent, I'm a Brit, and tree management is very, very different there. Probably because we don't have so many trees per person, but you will often go into a piece of woodland and you will see all the trees limbed up for 20 or 25 feet, which encourages and enhances the quality of lumber that will become from that tree when it's finally felled. So, you know, you may have some trees on your property. Do you want to enhance their value to the community by actively managing those trees? That's it from me. And if you want to learn more about the show, please check out the Splinter Group's website. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you, Tim. That was so cool. I love that. I think you and Cody are often on the same wavelength around this. Cody was from the forest to something, and I took a note down that you had said a phrase that was along the lines of tell the story of where it came from. And I think that's so important. I really appreciate that you shared all those really fun ideas about how local wood can be used in our local homes, our local lives, our local businesses. It's just so important. We can see where it grows. We can see how it grows. We can really influence how we manage our forests for timber production for those places where that's appropriate by working with local wood and by being really creative with treen and all sorts of other good things. So thank you. Again, folks, if you've got questions for Tim and Cody, keep posting them in the chat. I'm going to take it from here for a couple of minutes to talk briefly about another really important aspect of this pilot project, and that was the non-timber forest products, or NTF keys. So let's go ahead and bring that up. You're all going to ask, what is that? Just wait. So non-timber forest products, believe it or not, and I bet you believe it by now, these forests can produce more than just saw logs. We had some ideas about how different limbs and branches and burls could be used. But beyond that, during the Valley View Forest Harvest, we knew going into this project that we were going to have a lot of Western red cedar that was getting thinned out of the forest in order to make space and sunlight for all the variety of other plants we were trying to grow. Western red cedar, as many of us know, was an incredibly important plant for the Coast Salish people. And so we were able to invite the local Jamestown Squallum tribe and the Port Gamble Squallum tribe out to Valley View Forest in preparation for the timber harvest to actually harvest the cedar bark from those trees that were otherwise going to go to the mill. So Port Gamble Squallum tribe came out a couple of times and they gave us permission to share these photos and videos, which I'm going to put on screen here. And just a really great use of, yet again, a product, a piece of this forest to enhance culture, to enhance our local lifestyle here. We were very excited to be able to have that cedar bark go to an amazing cause. So I'm going to show a couple of different videos of what this looks like. One of the things that I did learn through this process is that in order for that cedar bark to be useful to the tribal people, the trees actually have to be a certain size. And they're a little bit larger trees than maybe are managed in a typical commercial stand. So it's just sort of an added thing to think about in our community forest moving forward, is as we do grow those bigger trees, which is our intention, there's going to be all these added benefits of having bark available, as well as the wood and the perching habitat for birds. Sorry, I'm trying to advance the slide here. There we go. And as they got really good bark pulls, we did this right at the right time of year, which was late spring. The intention there is to get the bark to pull in as long and tall a strip up the tree as possible. And it's pretty amazing to see how far up the tree some of this went. And it also worked out really well that we had selected these trees to harvest. And so basically as much of the bark as could be pulled was able to be used. And I'm going to go ahead and virtually introduce Gene Jones here of the Port Gamble Squallum tribe. And he's just going to tell us a little bit about this project at Valley View Forest as well. It's the first time we've been able to do this with the tribe. And so hopefully, definitely not the last time.
My given name is Gene Jones Sr. My native name is St. Austin, and I'm the Port Gamble Squallum tribal elder. Yeah, most of our old people used to wait till this time of the year in springtime, and they all said that the sap was running, so it made it real easy to peel the cedar bark. And cedar and cedar bark has always been real important to our people. They many uses for the cedar bark. They use it for making some of their clothing. Some use it for making baskets. So there's several different uses for the cedar. Uh, I don't know. I always kind of revert back to the treaty that was signed, and the treaty says that we're able to harvest wherever our old people harvested. They called it our usual and accustomed area in the treaty. So that treaty has really been a healthy part of our it was like the law of the land for our people. So uh, it it really makes my heart overwhelmed to find a place like this and have friends, like the ones that we have that are helping us to help our people to harvest and get the things that they need to keep our culture alive. So the cedar tree itself is a real strong symbol of our people. Our people used to use the limbs for making the limbs and the roots for making baskets, palm baskets, and regular baskets for storing things. And the cedar tree itself was taken down and used for canoes, for carving totem poles, or our totem poles that our people carved were like books for our people. They would each totem pole that was carved by someone that knew part of our history, and they were trying to keep our history alive through this carving. Uh, uh, some of our people are religious people now, and they're kind of frowning down on me because I'm a carver and I'm also a Shaker minister. And they said the two don't go together, but they do, because they think that in their eyes the totem pole is a graven kind of heathen kind of thing to do, but they don't realize that the totem pole is a story, and we're trying to keep our legends and our stories, events that happen to our people. You can look at a totem pole and you can tell exactly what happened at that in that period of time. Yeah, so that's a significant stuff.
Pretty amazing. I feel like we're just starting down this path of community forest and local wood and keeping everything in our own place and growing trees for specific purposes. And the tribes have been doing it since time immemorial. So looking forward to continuing to work with them. And we do expect to be able to do this again moving forward, because we are managing Valley View Forest for the future. And I'm going to speak very briefly about what that looks like on our end before anyone who would like to stay on. We'll just have a couple more minutes for questions. I know we're a little bit over time, so couple minutes on my end, and then we're gonna get to those questions. I saw some good ones in the chat. So after the harvest, I mean, we had all this great stuff going on, local wood, local cedar bark. What's gonna happen to the local forest? Well, we're gonna have to assess that. As part of our work here at the Land Trust moving forward, we're going to be doing a lot of monitoring of the Valley View Forest overall, as well as the harvest area specifically. And we're going to be doing a bunch of different kinds of monitoring. We're going to be doing qualitative assessments where we're going to just say how things look. Are we noticing noxious weed pockets starting up? Are we seeing really cool new plant species pop up? We're going to do a lot of wildlife data collection from cameras and bird surveys as to how wildlife are using the Valley View Forest. And then we're also going to do these more in-depth assessments that help us understand if we're getting seedlings recruiting into the understory, so seedlings popping up as we expect, if we're getting multiple structures coming up in the forest, what kind of vegetation is growing there, if there's any signs of stress in the forest. A lot of what we talked about earlier on in the presentation, I think that was the first presentation we gave about Valley View, where we really talked about the plan and about how we wanted that resiliency, that diversity. We're going to be measuring those things moving forward. So what it looks like right now, post-harvest, a little bit browner than this photo since some of the needles have fallen off the tree limbs that got left on the ground to drop their nutrients. But we've got a lot of light beginning to come into the forest floor. You can see sort of a sunlight patch in this large photo. And you can see one of our intentional gaps in the lower right-hand photo where we specifically had a little bit larger opening for those sun-loving species to come back into. That's what it looks like right now. And we can see already just a couple months after harvest that we are beginning to get the understory coming back. So in these three photos, we can see that the sword ferns are popping back up after the equipment's been through, after the branches have been dropped on the ground, after the trees that were selected for this round have come out. So just very encouraging that immediately sort of those shrubs with big root systems are really coming right back up. That's a couple months after the June, July harvest. The first photos, I should have said, were taken pretty much in July. So where do we expect it to go from here? We really expect that in the next couple of years, next 2 years, we're going to be seeing seedlings, tree seedlings coming up in the understory. This photo is taken at our Bulis working forest where we did a selective harvest in 2015. And this is an area that we spaced out, and you can see in the sunlight that there's this huge flush of shrub growth, which is also what we're hoping to get at Valley View Forest. And in the foreground, it's a little tough to see, but there's a very tall cedar seedling growing nice and healthy. That's 5 years after harvest. That thing started up in the first year or two after harvest. So we'll be going through the Valley View Forest harvest area. We're going to be looking at what kinds of plants are popping up in the understory. We're going to be looking at for those seedlings and those intermediate story trees and the health of the overstory trees. Want to make sure that we've got enough standing snags for wildlife and downed logs left on the forest floor. And we want to figure out what kinds of animals are actually using this place. So those are going to be some of our big next steps moving forward. And by moving forward, I mean for a very long time, we'll be continuing to check in on the forest, assessing these different things. As we go through that assessment, we've gone through the plan, we did the action of forest harvest. We're going to be doing our monitoring. We bring all that information back in-house and we adapt our plans as necessary. So did this pilot project work? Are there things we need to change? All those questions and changes will be coming forth before the next activity so that we make sure that we are in fact making positive progress towards those long-term goals of ecological benefits, economic benefits, social benefits, and that we're truly ready for a big community forest project. So I just want to say a huge thank you to all of you who have been coming along on this journey with us, whether it was out in the forest in the spring when we started the tree selection process, or if it's been through this 3 series of educational webinars. There's going to be a lot more to come. But for now, I do want to invite Tim and Cody back here on screen, and we can answer any questions that came up during this specific presentation.
Great. So we do have some nice questions from folks through the chat. The first short one is, Cody, how hot does your kiln get?
Yeah, that is, it can get up to around 175 degrees. But that's just the very tail end at the high peak, when you're really trying to get out that last little bit. That's a sort of a slow grade, 80, 90. A lot of the work, a lot of moisture will come out in that, Texas weather, not 90, 100 degree kind of weather. That moisture will just leave. And then you're trying, you go up a little higher if you need.
And it was cool to hear that Tim would, this group was going to be using your kiln. So love to learn about all this collaboration that's happening in between.
Yeah, absolutely.
And someone was asking what the difference between flat sawn and quarter sawn wood is, and why would you choose one over the other?
There's like aesthetic differences, in a flat sawn board. If you're looking at a flat board like this, the grains will look like smiley faces, like my mouth right there, like that, and that'll present sort of like a shape that if you turn it up sort of looks like a candle flame. So and it's more spaced out. You'll see the grain rings because they're like that. You get a very spaced out and a different kind of look, where if you take a board from the side of the log in here, these grains will be running vertically right there to the center, and then right there to the center. And that's where you see like a straight grain, a clear straight grain, is like something you could pay a very prime price for at a lumber yard. That board would be called quarter sawn, where those straight, the grains, how do you see that, are running in that way to this whole face of the board. That quarter sawn board is the most stable board in terms of how it will shift and change in its natural process of going from a tree to whatever you're using. That's the one that it's going to shrink, change, twist the least. So I think generally speaking, this is the most desirable. A quarter sawn board is kind of the cream of the log, where a flat sawn, a log where it's coming from the top, the board will want to cup or twist more so just based on how those grains are laying. So there's benefits for different things for what you might be working with. And then of course, there's, as you can picture these boards, that grain is changing on each board. So each board is a little bit different. Up here, you're running horizontally the grain. Over here, you're running vertically across the board. So there's all of this variation, and then that comes into a whole different profession of grading lumber, and what percentages of knots and all of this. And that's something that, you can do as a profession. There's a lot of information there, I guess. Yeah, hopefully that answered the question.
Yeah, I think so. And your details of just the different grains sort of leads into our next question. Have you noticed, either Tim or Cody, about whether a certain type of forest can produce different results or qualities of wood? Ooh, that was an exciting question, I can tell.
Do you have a thought on that, Tim?
I can use one of my favorite examples. It's a little obscure, but I like it. We're very used to seeing Madrona around here, and Madrona just wiggles and squirrels towards the light. And it's a really difficult wood to work with because when you fell it and drop it and dry it, it tends to twist and blow apart. And I, for a long time, have been, or was, bemused that there was a group of woodworkers on Vancouver Island who make all their furniture out of Madrona. And so I couldn't imagine how that could happen based on my experience of the wood that we see around here. And so I was up there and I asked the question, and the lumberyard I was at, the guy said, "Oh, you mean the Grove grown stuff?" So when Madrona grows in a sort of cluster of all the like trees and there's no competition from Doug firs or anything else, it just grows up straight. There's no reaction wood, and it's this beautiful furniture wood. So there's a sort of fairly extreme example, but I think it really clarifies how the conditions make the wood change. Cody?
Yeah, there's so much there. You know, I wish I could go grab 2 pieces of wood from the shop in right over there right now to show you. And it's also very interesting what is happening with Jefferson Land Trust in a management scenario that's a selective harvest versus a general, like if you go to Carl's and buy a 2x4. I'm not trying to say anything about Carl's. The very much that can be something coming out of clear cut. Those 2 things, a tree that's grown, that cedar that Carrie showed us that was coming up in that patch of sunlight versus a tree that's coming up in a clear cut environment it's night and day. You almost couldn't call them the same tree, and that's sort of the same. I mean, it's pretty much gone, you know, our ability to harvest old growth wood, but the stability of an old growth tree that's growing in the shade, those growth rings are, you know, as close as my fingers could get without touching each other, where a tree that's like a Western red cedar grown on a clear cut scenario, honestly, I've seen the growth rings that they're putting on, you know, potentially 3/4 of an inch per year. And so versus maybe in a shade scenario, you might be talking 20, 25 years for that same mass. And so that they're very different things, just that the tighter the grain, the tighter it grows, the more like dense and sort of, I want to say fine that wood is. And that all comes through. Again, something that I'm interested in, Tim is interested, I'm interested in how Tim is interested. These ideas, how we work with what we have though, is also very interesting. And how you can use what we do have in a way that is productive for our time. I could ramble. I don't need to.
No, that's really interesting. That was a really good question that came in, and maybe just share your last thoughts on given choosing the conditions, the site conditions for trees that you're selecting, how when both of you were separately going out to the Valley View Forest to identify which trees you would use for your projects or your business, what were you thinking about when you were walking around that area?
Well, let me go first. When we walked through that woodland, we were struck by this wonderful variety of Western bigleaf maple there. There was trees that were, I don't know, 4 or 5 foot across at the base, tapering, and it all looked like burl wood. And then it went up into this really skinny trunk. There was another tree that literally drew Zs going up. And again, there's a lot of interesting figured wood in those, I believe. And so we considered those, but in the end, the two trees that we chose because they were largely straight, and that's going to be the best for us to be able to make beautiful furniture from. So that was what we came down to. But when I put on another hat, my more wood turning hat, or wanting to make, you know, really exotic boxes, those other trees are really, really tempting. And they may also be really tempting to luthiers as tone wood. So there's this real balance between what you can take out of a tree, and some of those trees may actually have a balance of good furniture wood and tone wood. And that's the beauty of when you work with a tree. You never quite know what's in it until you have it on the ground and you start to look at it very, very closely. So I'm pretty excited for that prospect.
Yeah, it's a really interesting and kind of a special situation to actually get to walk through a forest and kind of get to feel the situation out, or tap into your instincts and kind of anticipate or guess or see what's going on with these trees. I selected trees. I'm remembering some of these maples that Tim was just describing were really dominant in the canopy, and I actually selected a few Western red cedars that had come up underneath a maple tree. And so I had specifically selected trees that I didn't go and look for the biggest possible Western red cedar I could find, but one that I was hoping grew slower because it was underneath this maple, which the tree is beautiful and the grain is beautiful and it's very tight. But yeah, just being able to feel those things out. And then I think very similar to Tim for me, again, straight and is wonderful for certain things. There's also this whole creative aspect of these different things, these big curves. I'm working on a project right now. It's where I'm picturing benches around this fire feature. And that just big curves would be so wonderful that it actually mirrored the round circle of that. But that's not something that's readily available. Eden Saw is a fantastic business, and they have lots of wonderful selection of global and domestic woods. But sometimes things like that are really interesting to be able to see, and then see what that inspires you to make when you're responding to those materials in a different way.
Yeah, that's great. Well, thank you both so much. This was really fun to hear both of you talk. You're both artists and skilled woodworkers, so this conversation could go on longer, but we've run out of time, and I think everyone was really impressed by the beautiful wood that you showed tonight. So thank you for your time.
Yeah.
Pleasure.
Thank you both so much. Really helping us, a huge part of taking this vision literally from the forest to the trees to the wood. So really interesting, and just a slice of where some of the local wood went. We talked a little bit about where the rest of it went in 2 weeks ago presentation, some of the other nonprofits and businesses. But thank you both, and thanks everyone who's been here, and we will see you at the next community forest pilot project. Well, it won't be pilot, next community forest harvest project. So night, everybody.
Good night.
Good night.